Now that we've reached the off season for the Ontario Hockey League and CHL in general, wanted to still produce some content during the off season. And last year I did the team history videos. This year, why don't we do a season by season history? So I'm going to do every video is going to be a different season as we go along. I'm going to start with the very first OHL season and we'll make our way to where we are in 2024-25. And I know that there's probably going to be some stuff that I miss as I wasn't around back in these earlier years, but it's kind of an overview as to how we got to where we are today with the history. So if this is something you're interested in, well, let's take a peek at what went on in the OHL. And the OHL that we know it goes back to the 1980-81 season. They wanted to operate independently from the Ontario Hockey Association. So there was a bit of a feud going on when it comes to major junior hockey in the province of Ontario. And from 1974 until 1980, they were known as the Major Junior Hockey League and then eventually adopted the name OHL after they agreed to pay the OHA $30,000 annually. This was the original agreement to compete for the Memorial Cup as well. So this was the framework of it. And of course, David Branch, the first commissioner, he was the one who oversaw a lot of these agreements and to get the OHL on its feet as it prepared to play its very first 68 game season. And they had 12 teams at the time. And out of the 12, 9 of those cities are still in the Ontario Hockey League today. So I'm also going to use the logos based on what the teams were back at the time, because I think it's kind of neat just to even see the evolution of all the team logos that we know of today. And we're going to start off with the Leyden division because it was separated by 2 teams. You had 6 teams in each division. In the Leyden division, there's some powerhouses here. The Soo Greyhounds led the way, a record of 47, 19, and 2, good for 96 points, and they were the league champions that year for the regular season. After that, the Ottawa 67s were second, 45, 20, and 3 was their record, 93 points. The Kingston Canadians, before we have the Frontenacs, they used to be known as the Kingston Canadians. 39, 26, and 3 was their record, 81 points. The Oshawa Generals came in fourth, 35, 30, and 3, 73 points. And the Peterborough Petes, 29, 36, and 3 was their record for 61 points. And at the bottom of the division, the Sudbury Wolves, 20, 45, and 3, good for 43 points. And you're going to notice with some of these teams, the struggles were pretty evident in the 1980s, and the Sudbury Wolves being one of those teams. But look at the division. Like right now, we're trying to figure out how teams work with alignments, and travel is always considered. But when you see Sault Ste. Marie in the same division as Ottawa and Kingston, that would not fly today. There is no way we would see those teams together. So it is fascinating just to see how things were that first OHL season. But when we head over to the Ems division, things very different. You'll notice that these teams, not as many points as the ones in the Leyden. The Kitchener Rangers led the way, a record of 34, 33, and 1, 69 points. So quite the difference right there. The Brantford Alexanders, they were second in the 80-81 season. They had a record of 34 and 34, 68 points. So playing 500 hockey that year. The Windsor Spitfires, they were third with a record of 33, 33, and 2, 68 points. The Niagara Falls Flyers, they were fourth that season, 30, 36, and 2, 62 points. The Toronto Marlboros, they were fifth, 31 and 37 was their record, good for 62 points. And then at the bottom of the division, the London Knights, 20, 48 was their record and 40 points. Now, some of the highlights from the regular season, the very first OHL All-Star game was held this season in Kingston. The Canadians were the host in 1981, and the Ems division ended up winning that by a score of 4-3, even though the Leyden division had stronger teams. It would be the Ems division winning the All-Star game. To note, Mike Keenan, he was the head coach of the Peterborough Petes at this time. The Petes, you're going to notice they've got a lot of history when it comes to head coaches. And Mike Keenan, of course, after this would go on to the National Hockey League. He won a Stanley Cup in 1994 with the New York Rangers. But it's still kind of cool to see that Keenan got his head coaching start in junior hockey. And for the Kitchener Rangers, they finished first in their division, but they were last in the OHL standings at Christmas. They would actually go on and have an outstanding second half of the season, propelling them to first in the Ems division. It was unreal from my understanding, from what I was reading, just that turnaround that Kitchener had that season. And Ernie Godden of the Windsor Spitfires, he set an all-time record of 87 goals in one season, and that record still stands today. So a record in the first season, and we'll see who can maybe catch up to that record. We saw Nick Lardis get 71 goals, but Ernie Godden of the Windsor Spitfires 87 that year. When you look at, let's look at the top 10 scorers for the OHL that season. John Goodwin, he led the way with 166 points of the Soo Greyhounds. Ernie Godden was second. He had 153 points that season to go with his 87 goals. Bernie Nichols of the Kingston Canadians, he was third in scoring that season with 152 points. Tony Tanti of the Oshawa Generals, 150 points. Steve Ludzig of the Niagara Falls Flyers, he had 142 points that season. Scott Howson of the Kingston Canadians, he's next with 140 points. Steve Larmer of the Niagara Falls Flyers, he had 133 points. Steve Gatsos of the Soo Greyhounds, 128 points. Tied with him was Randy Cunnyworth of the Ottawa 67s with 128 points. And then Doug Shedden, he had 123 points. So he was 10th in scoring that season. So it's interesting seeing some of the names from that season. And of course, they would go on to have careers in the National Hockey League and elsewhere. So those are your top scorers in 1980-81. Now, the playoff format, it was done different. And you'll notice in the 1980s for the OHL, the playoff format would be adjusted a few times. And here, it wasn't a best of 7 series. It was based on points. So some games would end in a tie, and so both teams would get a point, and then they would go on to the next game. So some series would be up to 8 games to get to that points difference. So in the division quarterfinal, there was only 2 series. The Oshawa Generals, they defeated the Peterborough Petes 3 points to 2, and the Niagara Falls Flyers defeated the Toronto Marlboros 3 points to 2 as well to advance. So in the division semifinal, the Soo Greyhounds, they would have their way over the Oshawa Generals 8 points to 4. And then the Kingston Canadians, they would win their series against the Ottawa 67s by 9 points to 5. So it's really different with the playoff format being this way with points. And then in the other division, the Kitchener Rangers defeated the Niagara Falls Flyers 9 points to 5. And the Windsor Spitfires, the upset over the Brantford Alexanders with 8 points to 4. Now in the division final, it was the Soo Greyhounds. They would go on to defeat the Kingston Canadians 9 points to 5. And then the Kitchener Rangers, they would defeat the Windsor Spitfires 9 points to 1. So a very dominant performance there by the Kitchener Rangers. So that would leave us into the J. Ross Robertson Cup final. And it would be the Kitchener Rangers taking it away from the Soo Greyhounds 9 points to 3. And that series, quite intense is my understanding, as it started off with a tie 3-3 on April 21st of 1981. But that point too, the series was going back and forth. So Sault Ste. Marie started the series on home ice, then they'd go to Kitchener, back to the Sault. So they went back and forth. So the travel would have been something else between those two teams. But for the most part, it was a pretty close series. 2 ties, and then Kitchener would win, actually 3 ties, and Kitchener would win 3 games. So 9 points to 3. So a very different format to what we have today. Now, so to the award winners that season, I'm not going to go through all the awards, but some of the standouts, like the Red Tilson Trophy for MVP, went to Ernie Godden of the Windsor Spitfires. The Eddie Powers Memorial Trophy went to John Goodwin of the Soo Greyhounds. The Matt Layden Trophy went to Brian Kilray, who was the head coach of the 67s at that time. And the Jack Ferguson Award went to Dan Quinn of the Belleville Bulls. So just some interesting names there. And also, just because I'm a fan of John Van Beesbroek, he won the W.F. Dinty Moore Trophy in the 1980-81 season with the Soo Greyhounds. So just wanted to throw that in there as well. Now, the Memorial Cup was also done a little differently in 1981. Windsor was the host city for the tournament, but they only had 3 teams compete. So the winner of each league, so you have the Kitchener Rangers, Cornwall Royals, and the Victoria Cougars. Those were your 3 teams competing for the Memorial Cup in 1981. So no Windsor Spitfires. So the host was not a part of the tournament back in 1981. Kitchener, they would place second in the round robin and then lost 8-2 in the Memorial Cup final to Cornwall, who featured Dale Howarchuk and Doug Gilmore. And this was Cornwall's second of back-to-back Memorial Cup championships. And at this time, the Cornwall Royals were playing in the Quebec Major Junior Hockey League, as it was called at the time. So after this, you would eventually get Cornwall joining the Ontario Hockey League, but at this time, Cornwall playing in the Q and defeated Kitchener for the Memorial Cup championship. So that was the 1980-81 season. I know this is a little different from what I've been doing on the channel, but I think it's fun to look back, checking out the history of how the OHL got to where it is today, and it all started in 1980-81. So let me know in the comments below if you remember that season, what stood out to you, and don't forget to hit like and subscribe, and I will be setting up an OHL history tab on the channel so you can follow along there, or you can even check out the team history videos that I did last season. So again, thank you very much for all your support, and we'll talk to you again soon.